Basement of La Penta, it's WICR.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to College Football Corner. Jersey, Joe Archino back here because we won't be in studio this week. We've got a little bit of a break towards the end of the week, so filming will resume the week after, but I think for now, of course, have to come in and put up, because it was a very big weekend in college football. Very top-heavy, like it often is, but the Alabama-LSU game, I think it merits discussion based on what happened in that game. And look, a lot of people thought that this had the potential to have upset written all over it whenever you have a game like this where the implications are so high for a program like LSU, who's really lost the last 6 games they played to Alabama now, which when you compare just the heavyweight nature of both programs is remarkable. But nonetheless, they have lost the last 6 matchups to Alabama. But I think when you look at it on its face, that was a game that came down to the little details. The little details were what was going to win a game of that nature, where it was so close, and it was so apparent how close that game was. Such a defensive matchup. The first points were not scored in that game until the fourth quarter, and the reason for that is the small details. Nick Saban preaches them every second of every day. He talked about something that I found fascinating, and that's the feeling you get of being complacent when you've done so much winning and it just seems like nothing's going to take you off your winning streak. Right now, Alabama's riding a 21-game winning streak, but I think most importantly, the thing that keeps Saban up at night is his team getting complacent. And I think sometimes that's a major concern when you're a coach like him, when your players just win and they keep winning and they keep winning. We see so many times in sports, why is the reason that it's so difficult to defend a title? It doesn't matter what sport it is. To win and repeat as champions is so difficult because of that complacency factor. It doesn't mean that you're not working as hard, but it's so difficult to put yourself in that same mindset. I mean, when you're trying to win something, once you taste it, it's so hard to get yourself back in that mindset when you're just trying to scramble from the beginning. But Alabama, certainly, I think to me, that's one of the things Saban does so well, is he keeps that feeling and he keeps them sharp all the time, and I think that's one of the ways that he just is. I mean, Nick Saban is a tough guy. He to really have to always put his nature down on the table for his players. But I think more than anything, when you look at Alabama and what they really might be able to do here, I said if they get past LSU, they're not going to have any trouble running the rest of the way, and I really still believe that. And the playoff might be a different story, but when you're talking about the SEC championship game and the 3 remaining games on their schedule, I just think, look, at the beginning of the year, we all looked at Alabama's schedule, and we thought that this could be the year where things kind of unravel for Nick Saban just because of how difficult it is, because there was a section in this schedule that was so grueling and demanding. I mean, you had Arkansas on the road at Tennessee, Texas A&M followed closely, and LSU after that. There wasn't much room for error, but based on the way that the season has kind of gone in the SEC, things ended up going Alabama's way. And then, of course, the most important thing for them was that bye right before the LSU game. Without that bye, I don't know if they would have won that game, but they had the bye, and I think that's the most important thing for it. But when you look ahead a little bit, I think the biggest thing that people were happy for this weekend was Texas A&M losing, obviously. Most people felt Washington deserved in that 4 spot, and understandably so. Look, is the Pac-12 weaker this season? Absolutely they are. But to me, you can't justify putting a Texas A&M team who did have a quality loss to Alabama over an undefeated Washington team. This isn't the MAC. This is the Pac-12. They've still played a good schedule. They played a very good Utah team on the road. And look, I think sometimes in college football, things end up working themselves out. This was one of those things where it didn't work itself out because Texas A&M loses on the road. And look, Mississippi State, it's been a down year for them too, but that was certainly a game and a situation where, based on what their rank was, the way that they kind of just lose that game right after, I think that kind of tells you a lot about that Texas A&M team right there. But moving forward a little bit, the conversation, I don't think, changes that much. We've seen the last final weeks of the season change dramatically the last 2 seasons. But this season, I think outside of Michigan, you're really not going to see that much change. Washington, I don't think you're going to see tremendous change from them. Even when it comes to the Pac-12 championship game, again, it's a down year for the conference, and largely, I think they've proved themselves against the top-tier teams already in that conference. You go to the SEC, look, we've already talked a lot about Alabama at length and what they've been able to do. I think you look at Michigan as the one team, though, that really is going to have you worried, and it's that Ohio State game like it always is. Michigan is so gifted defensively. Jabril Peppers is undoubtedly the best two-way player in the country. And there's not a lot of guys like Jabril Peppers who can do a little bit of everything on the field, but he most certainly can. He's got the numbers to back it up. But offensively is where I worry about Michigan in a game against Ohio State. Wilton Speight just isn't in the same category as a JT Bear, and I think JT Bear's largely had a great year, but there's been some down spots. There really has been for Ohio State. They really come back into the forefront and really give it to Nebraska, but Nebraska, they had their quarterback taken out of that game, so I don't know how you can judge that one very fairly. But that is going to be a huge game, and we have seen Urban Meyer be able to take advantage of that game, and a win there could very well help Ohio State dramatically, but that loss to Penn State is going to hurt. I mean, I really don't think Penn State's a great team. They get it done against Iowa in a big way, but I still don't think that. I think Penn State is still massively overrated. But when you do look at Ohio State, their season comes down to that Michigan game, and that game already as it is always going to be big, but I just still don't know if Michigan is talented enough offensively. And I'm not talking, I mean, look, Michigan's put a lot of points up on the board this season, but against the best teams they've played, against Wisconsin and against some of the other top-tier ones, it hasn't been the same offense, and that's why I think when they play Ohio State, we'll know if Michigan's offense is for real or not. And then you go, of course, to Clemson, which, again, they'll have an ACC championship game, but I don't think we look at that as any big threat to them. The one distinction you do have to make, though, about Clemson is they were the number 2 total ranked offense in the country last season. They dropped to the number 33 total offense in the nation this season. That, to me, is a massive, massive drop to take. I mean, you're not talking about going from 2 to 10. You're talking about going from 2 to 33. And it'd be one thing if you lose your quarterback. But largely, this is of so many of the same pieces. The most important piece of that team, of course, Deshaun Watson, and he's still there. So when I look at it, to me, a little bit interesting how big that is, and I think that is what might limit them from winning the championship this season, but still, they will be in the playoff without a doubt. Then we kind of look at the week matchups this weekend. Alabama at home against Mississippi State. Mississippi State 4-5 on the season. They just beat Texas A&M, but again, I talked about that complacency factor where Nick Saban just will not allow it to happen, and I do think that this is a game where it won't be the prettiest. Alabama's going to be beat up from that LSU game. That was a physically demanding, tiring game. It was a long, hard-fought one in the trenches, but I do think Alabama will gut it out because Mississippi State just doesn't have that same level of talent there. Clemson has got Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is an interesting one. I think this is a somewhat dangerous game here, but I do think at the end of the day, Clemson has been able to make the plays. Deshaun Watson, really, when it's come down to, he's thrown picks in big games, but he really hasn't let that faze him, and he has been able to come down to the wire and drive his team down the field and get a big win. But I think other than that, Michigan on the road against Iowa, interesting one. But I think we've kind of seen whenever Iowa's been tested that they're a pretender. Last week against Penn State was a big example of it. To me, this one against Michigan will be a little bit interesting. I definitely want to see how Michigan's offense is going to look in this game, but I don't think that anyone has any worries, and they shouldn't. But largely, that is the big portion of the schedule this weekend. You've got Texas A&M and Ole Miss, kind of interesting there, how Texas A&M bounces back from that loss. Washington against USC, I don't think anyone really expects too much from that. Again, there's just a big drop-off between Washington and everyone else in the Pac-12 this season. But other than that, we're just counting down the days as we get closer and closer to the end of the season. But make no mistake about it, I think since Texas A&M loses that game, the last weekend, we have our pretty surefire top 4. And the only thing I think that really changes that is a loss to Ohio State from Michigan the final weekend of the regular season. But we'll just have to wait and see. Until the next time, everyone, Jersey, Joe Archino here with the Sports Vault. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Archino and on Instagram, Jersey_Joe_Archino. And I'll catch everybody in the next episode.